Well, welcome to the Oxford Union, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is, to start, it is often said that fashion is a way for people to tell their story. And I wanted to start by asking whether or not you think fashion can also tell the story of a whole country or culture, like America or Britain, for instance. And if so, how this transition from individual expression to cultural expression works in your eyes.
Mark, you take this.
Well, let's break this down a little bit. I don't know. I mean, I definitely feel fashion is a form of self-expression. I don't think you can generalize and say that it's what you've asked. It feels like, I guess there's always this idea that like there's a style, like Italian style, French style, American style. But I think, and me as a fashion designer, I just think that there are people who are either into fashion or they're not. And whether they are or they aren't, they still express themselves somehow with clothes, and the clothes they choose, whether they want to be part of something or they want to be apart from something. But that fashion or clothing is just a form of self-expression in some way. And
you don't think that can be a story of a whole country?
Well, I mean, I don't know that any one particular fashion is the story of a whole country. Do you know what I mean? And I guess I live in a sort of a bubble, which is that, like, it's the fashion world as I see it. You know what I mean? I don't know how really in touch with what fashion is outside of the fashion bubble, you know?
Yeah.
What do you think, Edward?
I just think, you know, when you leave your house in the morning, however you dress is how you want the world to see you. Fashion through the years, you know, has connected with the world and society or Britain, whatever you want to call it, whether it's, I don't know, the punks or whether it's, you know, new romantics. But I think most importantly for me, fashion tells a story, for me personally, it's a story about, you know, celebrating differences sometimes, you know, talking about how different people are, how diverse people are, you know, tackling certain issues about, you know, I don't know, weight. I feel that's, for me personally, I can only speak from personal, that's where fashion really succeeds, when it tackles things to do with the world we live in or the country we live in, more than how you're looking necessarily.
You were saying how fashion is actually just about how you walk out the door each morning.
Yeah.
And personal to both of you, do you have a personal style? Is it a consistent style that you like to wear, or do you like to evolve as trends change?
I literally wear black. From the age of 16, you know, if you come into my, obviously it's a bit of a joke, but in my closet, there's 100 black shirts, 100 white shirts, black suits, and
I have a little bit more.
I have navy.
Yeah. Since when? I've never seen you in navy. But I have a bit more range than Edward, I think. I'll go from like sequin skirt to a dress to a kilt to black. Depending on my weight and how I feel about my body, I'll be more adventurous in the way I dress. And tonight we decided to dress alike.
Yeah, I clearly missed the memo with that, yeah.
And I don't know, and if we're talking about the psychology of it, for me, sort of growing up, I always wanted to sort of hide. I felt that my work had to speak for itself and not how I looked. So I guess my insecurities sort of led me to sort of always be in a shroud, so I could produce and reflect on others, project on others what I wanted to see in terms of fashion, I guess.
I always think of fashion as entertainment, and I guess I love the idea of, you know, all the world's a stage. And I've said it before, you know, I just think that we all costume ourselves for this great piece of theater that we perform every day. And I like the idea of fashion as entertainment and fashion designers as entertainers. And as all of us who wear it, you know, the players, and that's what has always interested me about fashion, is identity and creating identity through clothes.
Well, I suppose following from that, to what extent do you think fashion has a responsibility over the influence it has on young people or people in general? Do you think fashion brands are ever to blame for causing indirect harm when creating this sort of ideal of perfection? I mean, I think fashion, like I said before, does have
a responsibility sort of to society, sort of, you take a model, you know, someone I'm obsessed with, a model, Adjoa.
Yes.
You know, very beautiful, Adjoa Boa, sort of a great model. She really speaks to a generation of women because she sort of wears her heart on her sleeve. She talks about sort of mental illness and to a whole new generation. I think that's when fashion really, for me, succeeds in sort of transcending the idea of just clothes. You know, when we talk about, you know, like as I said before, you know, tackle people's insecurities and fears. What was I going to say about that?
I mean, I think now, particularly, or in the past couple of years, it feels that there's this, it feels wrong not to use our voice and the vehicle that we have to go a little bit further than just making some pretty clothes and showing them on some nice girls, et cetera, et cetera. But I really resent and kind of get annoyed when people feel like, oh, you know, it's the fashion community who creates these these ideals of what women should look like or how they should behave, because it's like sort of saying, like, you know, you could say that about athletes or sports or anything, you know. And I think people should be educated and should not point fingers and say this is your doing, and you know, you've used this and therefore that's what you believe. You know, it's like people see things the way they want to see them, and you know, so much goes into making clothes and presenting clothes, and one's choices are not necessarily one's political views. Everything is not a political statement, you know. But I do think now more than ever there is a sense for everyone in the industry to use our platform and the vehicle that we have as a way to express something more, like I said, than just a pretty dress.
So if you think that increasingly the fashion industry has this responsibility, do you think we should be using more plus-size models, for example, or actively ensuring we have a diverse range of models from ethnicity point of view?
I always believe that as, you know, a society of diverse voices is ultimately more powerful than a singular vision or voice. So, you know, I mean, it would be great if, I don't know, black models, Asian models, you know, plus size, if they all became a part of the conversation. I don't like tokenism. I think there's a difference. Yeah. But I feel like as being a part of a conversation to move forward, that I like.
I think it's very, you know, it's very hard in any profession, and to have a point of view and to be everything to all people is impossible. Yeah. So, I mean, and I think it's quite a sensitive subject, the idea of diversity, because I think, you know, it tends, and I don't want to get too political about it, but, you know, you don't want to find yourself making a count when you're casting a show and making sure, like, you tick boxes and you have this, you have that, because I think you know, that doesn't do anything, but to have a conversation and to
being a part of, and being open.
And to also, again, for the audience to understand, you will not get everything from all people, but that is not what and no one can do that. Do you know what I mean? So it just feels, again, conversation, understanding, awareness, being open is something that I think everybody in every area needs to be now more than ever.
Yeah.
I think we all agree that fashion has like incredible influence, and for you, Edward, this influence came about at such a young age. You became a fashion director at the age of 18. How did you deal or start to comprehend the sort of influence that you had at such a young age?
I didn't. I was, you know, a regular teenager. I mean, people saw something in me. So I started working at a very young age, but all I can say was I was propelled by fear. I was propelled by insecurity. I was just propelled by the need to, I don't know, to just have a voice, really. But apart from that, what I learned from that age was the importance of family, having a good sort of team of people around you that you could count on, who cared about you, and that's something. The most important thing I've sort of carried from those days is the idea of sort of family. I mean, if you know Terry and Trisha Jones from ID, who I worked for at the time, they really believed in sort of a family network. So that's kind of what I carry, you know, from the early days. And
Well, you started saying, you started that answer with saying that you were propelled by fear and insecurity, and Mark, you nodded quite vigorously along.
Yeah,
do you think that's
I had
general?
what he had.
Do you think that's quite common across fashion? Do you think a lot of editors and designers are?
I think it's quite common among creative people.
Yeah.
Maybe all people. I don't know. I don't know if fear drives people or ego or whatever or both. But I don't know.
I mean, do you ever sit there after your show and go, okay, this is it. I'm happy. I'll never do another one.
Every time. I'll never do this again.
I've reached the. I think there's something that in creative people that propels you, and for me it's that insecurity really, and I'm happy that I have that.
Yeah, it's a healthy thing, I think. It's like that sort of fear of putting yourself out there, but this need and desire, that's so great that you have to do it.
You have to do it, yeah.
Both of you are collaborating in this conversation.
Would you like us to fight or debate?
Well, it might make it more interesting. I don't know. Collaboration is obviously really important in fashion. How, on a personal level, how important is collaboration? And actually, from the wider level, as fashion as a whole, how important is collaboration?
Take this one.
Well, for me, I mean, what is it? The whole is the sum of its parts. You know, that's first and foremost. So I work with a team of people. You know, I don't create alone. I work with a group of people. We start a dialogue. We talk about things. That evolves into fabric, which becomes patterns and shapes, and then becomes a presentation. There's stylists involved. There's press people involved. There's the people who do the. There's a lot of people.
We've got all of these guys involved.
There's all these people. All of you. There's a lot of people involved, and then it goes further than that. Then there's the magazines and the editors and the photographers, and then there's the biggest and most important part of this, which is the audience that you're trying to reach or hope to reach, and the people who buy your clothes or who appreciate your clothes, and through that appreciation, whether it's through consumerism or just appreciation, that you start to change or tweak and the landscape of this world that we live in, and that is collaboration. It's not one person doing anything on their own. It's just a series of people, a network, and what is it? Satellite.
Well, you both draw upon that theme of people, and do you think that fashion really is accessible to everyone? Because obviously a lot of designer brands are expensive. How can you provide the fashion brand for everyone if there is that barrier? How do you try and combat that?
I mean, I remember growing up, I didn't grow up with any money. I wasn't from a rich family, but what fashion gave me was an escape into a world of creativity. If I couldn't afford that Junior Gaultier jacket that I wanted, I would get one from the market and customize it. If I couldn't afford those Catherine Hamnett amazing t-shirts, I would just, it brought it, and I think it just brings out your creativity. No one is saying, like Mark is not saying, here's the dress, go buy it. Maybe Mark is saying, here's an idea of what you can be or become.
Yeah, I am again sorry to disappoint you, but I'm totally in agreement with Edward on this. I think fashion is for everyone because it doesn't. Owning a dress doesn't mean it isn't what it's about. I mean, that's a great thing, and if you have the ability to buy something, but I think like with art, like with music, you don't have to own it. You can experience it, and if you relate to it, if it moves you, if you have some kind of primitive connection or it inspires you, then you go out and you get that jacket, you hack into it, and you put some shoulder pads in it, or
fun with it.
or whatever it is. Or maybe it inspires you to do something completely different.
Yes.
But I think that's what creativity does: is it stimulates and it inspires people. And so ownership isn't the important thing.
Also, expensive clothes, that's only a part of fashion. Yeah. That's not all, that's not all fashion is. There's so many ways of dressing and so many ways of styling yourself. And I think you just have to sort of embrace it all, really, and just let your imagination do the rest. I mean, that's what we both did. I guess.
Yeah, I think fashion's this place where everybody comes to reinvent themselves or to invent themselves, and that's again, that's this part of magic. I mean, I think is that you can just, well, you can be or you can pretend to be anybody you want to be.
Yes, basically.
The audience here are mostly made up of young people, and there might be people in the audience who actually want to be designers or editors themselves. What do you think the biggest challenges and opportunities are for young designers and image makers in Britain and America moving forward?
I think in this day and age, everybody thinks it has to happen now. Speed. Everyone thinks, I have to be successful now. It has to happen, or I'm not viewed as successful. When I was growing up, we had time. I think no matter what's coming, you need time to learn your craft. You need time to grow into who you're going to be. I feel that time is what I had. Learning, making mistakes. One picture a week instead of 6 pictures in a day. I was given the chance to be able to grow naturally. And I feel like, yes, that's what it's an urgency today that I didn't have growing up. I mean...
Yeah, goddamn internet.
I don't know what to say.
Bad internet.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's just a different world, isn't it? Like, yeah, I went into I began designing clothes at a very young age, and it's been 30 plus years since I started working, and I don't know. It's like I meet sometimes students in fashion, et cetera, and they've learned in a very different way. And again, it is a lot to do with time. And my class, my graduating class, was like 42 people, and now there's 350 people in a senior class at fashion school. And everything's taught like on computers and iPads and devices. And it's like, I draw. So.
I remember assisting and having to sort of literally return all the clothes. I mean, these days you call a car, you pack the stuff in, it's gone. Having to return clothes by foot from West London to the other side of London. And I just...
You sound like, it sounds like my parents, like saying like when I was your age, I had to walk 20 blocks to school. That was my calling. I didn't have any, there was nothing else I wanted to do. So I think if it's in you and that's what you want to do, you'll do it. You'll overcome whatever you have to overcome. Because that's the sum of it, really.
The balance between tradition and innovation is something that artists in every art form struggle with, but fashion seems to be unique in that so much of it has to do with novelty, what is new, what is suited in that particular moment. How do you try to achieve that balance between honouring what's gone before and constantly breaking new ground?
I mean, in terms of fashion generally or more my work?
Fashion generally.
Fashion generally. I think, you have, fashion always respects the past to create something new. Like I'll go to Marc's show, and Marc, it's so bright. He can take something from the 20s or 40s, put it through a mill and create an image that's so new for today. And I think that's the strength, of fashion, when you're able to take what's gone on before, put it through a blender and create something for today. In terms of magazines, I always say, there are 3 things I believe in, which is sort of reflection, projection, and documentation. Reflection means I look back at history, Projection is sort of I look at what's to come, what's possible, possibilities, and documentation, what's around now. And I try to mix these to create something that's for today. I mean, what can I say?
I always think of the Chanel quote that he who insists on his own originality has no memory. And so again, I feel like a creative person in some respects is a sponge that absorbs a lot of things. And it's once it's put through that spin cycle of your mind and how it comes out based on the time that we live and where you're at personally, maybe the world and where it's at politically or what economically, whatever the reasons why you process it in the way you do, it does come out as a different thing. Even if you try to recreate something, you just, through its sort of progress and cycle, comes out in a different way. And I think sometimes one makes a deliberate attempt to go against something that you know, but it works both ways. I think fashion can be a mirror and it can also be an escape. So there are people, I think, certainly in fashion, whose creativity comes from holding up a mirror to what they see, like a popular voice. But even that becomes sort of that person's fantasy of what they see, not really what is seen, And then there are other people who, I think, just absorb things and, again, like it comes out in a different way.
I go to a lot of shows, but every time I'm at one of your shows, I always wonder, how do you manage to do this? Time and time again. How do you manage to...
I feel this. You look at magazines and you look at stories and you think, well, how do these editors go and look at these fashion shows, then come up and put it into a completely different context? And then you realize it's like looking at art or listening to music. It's so many different cliches. It's in the eye of the beholder, but it's also this idea of stimulating or generating this kind of inspiration. So you realize that what you trigger by doing something that resonates in some way, like in the mind of another creative person, in the mind of that photographer, in that stylist, that makeup artist, will become reinterpreted into something that that you've triggered, but isn't at all what you intended. You know what I mean, or meant. And that's just that. Isn't that evolution and like sort of kind of dialogue and I don't know.
The creative muse.
Yeah.
Mark.
Edward.
We're incredibly lucky to have both of you in particular, because we have I am, we are, to have a representative from sort of American fashion and British fashion. I'd be amiss not to bring up the sort of your own fashion weeks. I guess I wanted to ask what were your favourite memories of sort of a New York Fashion Week and London Fashion Week, and how you think they're different in their approaches to their own. Yeah, they're different in their approaches.
London Fashion Week. Oh my God! My memories of London Fashion Week are sort of. I remember starting at ID and not really getting many tickets for shows, but just wanting to see, sneaking in with my friends, like Pat McGrath and and Craig McDean, who are sort of world-renowned in their fields, but sort of sneaking into shows, trying to find, somewhere to hide, sit on the floor, whatever. It was so exciting just to be there. And then I remember later shows, sort of Lee McQueen and The Fire and the Shalom being sprayed. It's London Fashion Week for me has always been sort of about setting trends and being creative. And we still have it today with people like J.W. Anderson and, Molly Goddard. And I feel, London, there might not be a lot of sort of money, in the country, but there definitely is a lot of creativity. And that's what I remember whenever I think of sort of the history of London fashion, really.
Yeah, that's what I think of too. I think the schools here also, I remember going to St. Martin, I didn't go to St. Martin, I went to the Parsons School of Design, but I always got this feeling as that the American design schools, like the Fashion Institute of Technology and Parsons, had this notion with the students, or their idea was that they were going to turn the students into good assistant designers. Whereas when you went to St. Martin's, you really got the sense that there were professors there who were really pushing the students to be creative and to express themselves and to find a voice and express a vision, which I think was very different than the way the schools in the US sort of taught you, or the underlying sort of message of your education in a US school. So I think that's reflected in the shows. So I think in the New York, I don't know, I don't go to shows, but it feels during New York Fashion Week, there's a presentation of commercial clothes for the most part. And I think there's a few exceptions, but I think for the most part, that's what you're seeing, is presentation of commercial product. Whereas in London, you're seeing real
sort of,
young designers or more established designers, but expressing themselves in their vision of what fashion is and what a show I think should be.
Yeah, I feel like London's, there's a lot of ideas. You throw out ideas, kind of, some develop more than others. And by the time it gets to New York, they've sort of developed into kind of a commercial place, a place to sort of where people
Which isn't a bad thing, it's just different.
It's different, yeah.
Which city is more fashionable, New York or London?
I love both.
Well, I have to say, I think I always, what's so great, I think, about London and New York, and I think that they share, is that their youth culture is so amazing. I mean, there's always been such an incredible music scene and art scene in both London and New York City. And so, as in my mind, that's one thing. I mean, although they're different, they have a similar energy. And the young people have always been very vocal, and I mean visually vocal as well as vocal. And I think, again, art, music, fashion in both cities is always really great. And it always has been. I mean...
Always, historically. And there's also a sense of urgency in both cities, a sense of anything is possible, I think.
And fearlessness, like sort of good, in your face, just do it.
Yeah.
You bringing up art and music, how influential is art and music on your own collections?
Hugely influential. I mean, I think art plays a huge part in work, in my work, and music does as well. I mean, it always has. I don't know. I was about to try to tell a story, but lost my train of thought. No, it's very important. I think I used to, or I'll tell it. So I used to, I think when I was younger, I used to be very intimidated by the art world, and I just felt like, oh, I'm a fashion designer, and although I was living in New York at a very exciting time, and there were a lot of really amazing artists just sort of starting to show their work, etc., I always felt like, oh, we're going to stay with the fashion people. I'm going to run with my model friends and do my fashion thing. And I felt like because I didn't have enough of an art history, not enough of an art history background or know enough about art, that I felt like uncomfortable sort of in that world. And then many years later, I got over that sort of insecurity and feeling intimidated. And I think that my work in some way got better because my curiosity became like less stifled. Like I was less afraid and started looking at things and seeing things and becoming interested in things that I just felt like, again, was not part of my world. Music was I never felt that way about music, but art always had that effect on me.
I think now might be a good time to open up to the audience, if that's okay. Before we open up, I should say that unfortunately Edward won't be able to ask questions on the vision of British Vogue because he's keeping it under wraps. So please don't ask any questions about that. But if you do have a question, please raise your hand nice and high, and then wait for a microphone to come. So let's start right over there. Yeah, you.
So I researched comic books and magazines from the 50s, and I noticed during that time period a lot of women are portrayed in very similar fashions. So I was wondering if you had any opinions about how the fashion world, instead of constricting women today, has opened up possibilities and opportunities.
Yeah, it's like what Marc said before. As the times have moved on, people in fashion have realized that we have a responsibility. We can't just be a cottage industry just creating amazing things and being cut off from the real world. And fashion, can say a lot about the times we live in, about race, about creed, about, it can say a lot. And I think now in 2017, more than ever, people are really embracing that. When you look at models, these days, you have Slick Woods, who's like a bold, very strong gay woman. so many, diversity really is the word. It's enjoying, I wouldn't say Renaissance because I've always done it, but it's really a great time for diversity and for women in addressing issues, I think.
Okay, yeah, anything to add?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, life changes and people's attitude change, and thank God for that in some ways. I mean, you think about women in 50s advertisements in magazines, with a corset on and a full skirt in front of a washing machine, as if you know what I mean? And that was what society thought women's role was to look nice for their husband and, sort of take care of the home or whatever. That was, that was a view then. And I think right now, as Edward ended, we have I think it's not only responsibility, but there's just this desire. It's exciting to see people and all people doing different things, yes. And that's what's stimulating. So it goes beyond responsibility. I think there's just an interest, and it's just so much cooler, fresher, nicer, and more exciting to have your eyes wide open, yes. And take as much in as possible, and to hear different voices, to see different things, to hear it expressed in different ways. And thank God for that.
Thank God.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's go you at the back there. Maybe you should pass the mic down the row, and then you pass the mic down. So you pass the mic down.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for your talk. We started talking about technology, and I was wondering what you think about technologies in fashion, whether it regresses fashion or it helps it, not in terms of sales, obviously, but in terms of creativity. And I know that you took up Instagram fairly not such a long time ago, and because you want to quote to stay in real world. So I was wondering if anything changed for you, or you just find inspiration from there, or it's better for reaching your audience.
I mean, I'm quite frightened by technology, and I really don't know that I'd be able to work in a few years from now. I don't know that I'll be able to work in the way that I'm used to. I'm a little frightened about, I love going shopping and going to stores, and I like the social aspect of trying on clothes and seeing, things, touching them. And yet it seems, especially in the US, that people shop more and more by, by computer. You know what I mean? They go online and they buy things. And I don't even know the words. I don't have the language for all this conversation. But so I'm quite frightened. I mean, I am a bit of a Luddite. I was like one of the last holdouts for Instagram. But I have a very good friend in New York who always says a computer is a tool, and in the right hands, it's a wonderful tool. So Instagram is the same thing. I can keep in touch with people, or I see things that people, I have really, there's so much distance between me and them now, or they're people from my past, and they post things, and some of them are wonderful memories of life many years ago, on Throwback Thursday or whatever. Or, but it's also, again, embracing it has stimulated me, as opposed to sort of saying, no, this isn't for me, and I hate technology, and damn you, Instagram, so by embracing it, I get to experience something positive from it. But I am really not very well versed in technology, and it does frighten me, because again, I learned in such a different way, and it seems to be the direction in which the world's moving. So, what do you have to say about that?
I agree with Marc. No, I mean, I was one of those. I was always behind the scenes. We come from a behind the scenes culture, sort of where you were a stylist and you never came forward, or you were an editor. And just like Marc says, just discovering sort of social media and the whole digital world has really expanded my mind and changed my work essentially, and also introduced me to a whole new generation of people that I might never have met otherwise, I think. As well as keeping up with friends and acquaintances. It keeps me in touch with, I'm obsessed with youth, and it keeps me in touch with a whole new generation. I love to see what you're all doing, peeking in and watching, and so we have to embrace it, I think.
Okay, great, yeah. Let's go right at the very back in the blue, yeah.
Hello. Thank you for the talk. Good evening. I wanted to ask that of late we've been noticing that Vogue has been voicing its opinions about politics, especially since the presidential elections. And there has been some sort of backlash online that, this is not your space. So what are your opinions on this? Does fashion really have a space when it comes to expressing political opinions?
Yeah, I mean, going back to what we've discussed, definitely, I think fashion, for the past few years has addressed every issue. As you said, whether it's, when I say political, I'm not just saying, what's going on in Parliament but the politics of being a human being, size, weight, religion, all those things I find political, and I think fashion, does address them. Look at someone like Vivienne Westwood, she's got her beliefs, and she goes around, knocking on people's doors and telling them what she believes, yeah. So I think fashion, it can be political, can make people, see things differently, really.
No. I think anybody with a voice, again, can use it to express whatever it is they feel. And if you're not interested in what they feel or how they say it, then turn the channel. There's just so many things out there. And I know, again, speaking of the Instagram thing, sometimes I've expressed myself or a belief in a certain thing, and then you get like all these hateful comments back saying this is no place for you to express how you feel. And it's like, well, I thought this is exactly the place for me to express how I feel. Like social media, you know what I mean? Like, and I think the idea of saying fashion is not the place to express how you feel makes no sense to me. It's like, well, of course it's the way to express how you feel. Whether you choose to hear it that way or from that source, that's another thing. But turn the channel if you don't like what we have to say.
Yeah, let's go. You, yeah.
Thank you so much for your talk, and good evening. I wanted to ask you more about your design process and what exactly goes into making the designs, and if you keep any sort of rituals or habits to spark your creativity.
First, we sacrifice a virgin. Then we don these robes. We get around a circle. We light candles. I work with a team of people, luckily, very great team of people, and what it starts out with is a conversation. We all sort of, either we're usually reacting to what we've just done and saying like, what did we like about it, what would we change about it, and then we start looking at what other people have done and where we're at, and we start making choices. We first choose fabrics and colors, and then those fabrics and colors sort of morph as we become more clear about what it is we want to say with the clothes we're making in that given season. So then we start a process of sketching, then pattern making, fitting toiles and muslins, then the fabrics begin to come in, and then we start to change that once things are rendered in their actual fabric. And then it takes on further, it changes continually until the end of the process, which is the show. Kind of, again, as we see something, it always has a knock-on effect, and it's a chain reaction, and so we continue to work until the time of the show, and that's kind of the process in a nutshell. I mean, leaving out a lot of crying and pain and blood and
Yeah, let's go to you in the corner there. Yeah. Yeah, you. Yeah, the one who's...
Thank you. Thank you both for being here tonight. I just wanted to ask, I wouldn't say controversial, but I'd really appreciate if you could both share your opinions on this. So obviously fashion is a very important space for people in terms of expressing their ideas and their beliefs and what they value in current society. But it seems that the line between fashion and cultural appropriation has seemed to get thinner and thinner. I was just wondering if you guys had any immediate views or what you see the role of fashion would be in, let's say, a few years' time on actually respecting and acknowledging the origins of, let's say, particular prints or fabrics or hairstyles, and yeah, how you think fashion can, I guess, one, either amend or, I guess, going forward, learn to be more inclusive and more acknowledging of the diverse fashion inspirations across the world.
I mean, you know, fashion in its essence is about taking from everywhere. It's about, you know, taking inspiration, you know, from everywhere, you know, be it, I don't know, where, you know, different countries or history or from, you know, from everywhere. And I just feel with cultural appropriation, it's a very delicate subject, but I feel like if, you know, someone appropriates something, so long as they give credit where it's from, you know, so long as they tell you, you know, a history of where that idea came from, I'm kind of normally fine with it, you know. It's, you know, we work in fashion, it's a dream, but if you are going to appropriate just, you know, credit, what's the word, the original, what's it, inspiration, should I say? Or
How would you go about doing that? If you wanted to, you've designed something, say, how do you go about accrediting where that inspiration is coming from?
I find it very difficult. This is a really sensitive subject, and I learned a very valuable lesson as I showed, like, about a year and a half ago, a collection where we showed wool dreadlocks on girls' heads. And I was very inspired by people like Lana Wachowski, who's a director friend of mine, who wears her hair like that, the rave culture, Marilyn from the 80s and Boy George. And I didn't feel I was doing anything wrong. You know, I really didn't. I felt like I was expressing myself, and these were the people who, and the Slits, the band The Slits. So these were my references and the reasons why I was inspired to do it. I wasn't, by showing that, saying that this was the origin of dreadlocks, and yet it caused this whole thing. And I think, you know, what I learned from it was that, in the time we live, I think it's very dangerous to say, like, you can't use this, you can't look at that, you can't borrow from that, you can't be inspired by that. I think that's setting up people for a very, you know, stay in your own lane. I don't really understand that mentality, and I think that's a very dangerous way of thinking. But what I did learn from that experience is that we do have some, again, responsibility and obligation to be sensitive, especially when people, when people do say that this hurts or this feels like appropriation. At least listen to what they have to say, because I reacted out of anger. You know, like, I felt I was been attacked for doing something that I felt was creatively my right to do. Do you know what I mean? And what I did learn, like I said, from that experience was what's really important is that a conversation is two people. So if somebody is expressing something, or again, some pain or some problem with what you've done, listen to them and listen to why it's a problem for them before reacting. But I do believe that creative people shouldn't have any kind of border patrol on what's okay to look at and what's okay to be inspired by. So I stand by that, but I do, like I said, I've learned that a conversation requires listening to the other person as well.
Okay. Yeah, you on the end there. You sort of, yeah, you just turn around. Yeah, you, yeah.
Yeah, you.
Hi, thank you for this evening. It's been really interesting. You were talking about fashion and having a responsibility, and I think there's talking about sustainability and kind of fashion as a community, not doing enough now, and talking about, like, the waste and many other effects on the environment. How do you feel as a creative about the effects that you have, and how other people, like, what's not being done or what is being done now?
Yes, I mean, going back to Vivienne Westwood, you know, she's all about sustainability. She is going, literally knocking on people's doors. There's so many new London designers, young designers, you know, who believe that sustainability is the way forward. I think it's very much a conversation, you know, part of the fashion conversation right now. And I feel there are people sort of tackling, I mean, it's sort of with Stella McCartney. I remember she used to be the only one, and we would all be, you know, a bit like, oh, okay, you know, those shoes. But I feel like, you know, like Mark said, in the world we live in now, you know, everyone has a responsibility, and everyone is trying. I mean, all the designers I know, you know, no one's perfect, but at least there is a conversation and people are addressing, you know, the idea of sustainability or what we're doing to the world we live in, you know, whereas maybe years ago nobody cared, you know. But I feel like now more and more people are sort of thinking further, maybe.
Such a paradox, fashion. I mean, you know, every 6 months it's something else, and by the nature of what it is, you're supposed to, I mean, you're presented with something new or a new thought or a new idea, and it makes you want to just get rid of everything you've seen before, you know, and embrace this new thing. So I think the very nature was Oscar Wilde who said, so ugly they have to change it every 6 months, you know, or so awful they have to change it every 6 months. But yeah, I think the nature of fashion is always change, and change makes a lot of waste, you know what I mean? It's not always for the best. So sustainability and fashion are two things that seem to be quite at odds with each other by the nature of what they represent. But I think that there's a gray area, you know, everything isn't always so black and white. So maybe not all fashion will address sustainability, but maybe some will, and maybe if each person in this room and outside of this room does their part to make this world a little bit better place, then we won't have to worry about how bad fashion is every 6 months and how much we have to change it. We'll all be doing our part, and that's the most important thing.
And people are talking about it, which is really a great thing.
Agreed. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, let's go to you just there.
Thank you. And again, as everyone said, thank you so much for coming and for sharing your honest opinions. It's been really a joy to hear you speak. So as we've been talking about the conversation that's been happening around environmentalism, around the political arena, both in the UK and the US, consumers are becoming a lot more educated. And they're sharing their opinions, and that's a lot easier because of social media and because of different avenues like magazines and everything like that. So how have both your companies respectively reacted to that change in consumers' education and their brand values? And do you like that conversation?
I think it's your turn to start.
Okay, all right. I think it's your turn. All right. What was the question again? No, just repeat a little bit.
Maybe a quick summary, yeah.
Seeing the change in consumers' education levels and they're caring about that, how have your companies reacted to that, and do you like that conversation?
So I think there's there's different facets to fashion and to this conversation. So there's there's always a certain, and it's probably the smallest percentage of the consumer or the population that it's from the heart. It's like a whim, that there is no conversation. It's like the draw to something that they want or they desire is so great that there's no conversation whatsoever. It's just instinct and whim and pure passion and desire. And then there's this consumer side, which I think, things like social media or online shopping, where you take, where you strike a chord and you see that you've sort of struck a chord, and you start to listen to the customer and say, I know we just recently went through this with our watch licensee, for instance. I didn't think people even wore watches anymore because they have their time on their phone, but apparently there's this device, like this Apple Watch thing. Yeah, Apple Watch. And so the whole movement has had these smart watches and things that connect to your phone and tell you how many steps you've taken each day, which honestly, as long as you're walking, I don't know why you need to know how many steps you're taking. But anyway, there's this whole thing, and so, and because of the product, we set out to do a group of images where we engaged a group of young women who expressed this sort of communication, and the stylist sort of took all of this into their like sort of creative process and said, okay, well, this is what the product is about. It's about connecting people, and these are all women in different, sort of areas who do different things, and so this is what we're going to do, and this is how we'll interpret it, and then it will go back on social media. So it wasn't a print ad campaign, but it kind of went full circle from what the product was about to who it was speaking to, and then using those people as the subjects, and then turning the cameras and letting them speak about it, and then giving it back to that thing. And I think that's where fashion is in a lot. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think that's what fashion's become. But the part of fashion that really stimulates me the most is the first part, which is that none of that market research or any of that kind of demographics or instinct. It's just kind of instinct and it's whim, and it's like just if you can dream it, you can create it, you can do it, and that's it. You put it out there, and if you love it, then there you are. What do you have to say about it?
Exactly what you said.
I think that was pretty comprehensive. Let's go just to the front here. Maybe pass the mic forward. Yeah, there we go.
As everyone said, thank you. I think one of the most interesting parts of this conversation was that both of you were willing to share with us that your creative process is very driven by fear and at times insecurity. Because I think to most of us in the audience, leaders of the fashion industry project or are the embodiment of confidence. So I was just wondering if you could flesh that out a little bit more and share with us specifically what it is that you're afraid of.
The creative process.
No, what are you afraid of?
What am I afraid of? Wow, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Creatively?
I didn't ask the question.
What am I afraid of? Oh God, that's funny enough. That's like.
What was the fear and insecurity that led you to get into fashion?
Not being good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Really, not being good enough. Not being everything enough. Really, not being, I don't know, good looking enough, not being talented enough, not coming from a family that was rich enough. All those things really drove me to fashion. But those are the same things that enable me to sit here in front of everyone today. Those insecurities and fears are what kept propelling me to be able to sit here. And they're not gone by any means, but at least now I know that I'm kind of been around for a while, so I think, I've learned. I'm okay, I'm okay. So yeah, that's really it. The fear of not being good enough, across the board.
Yeah, I mean, without becoming a group therapy session here. Yeah, I mean, I like Edward, I still to this day have this fear of I mean, I do what I do and I enjoy what I do first and foremost because it is what I love to do. Yeah. But I am equally dependent on the reaction of others, and I guess my self-worth in some ways depends on what you think of what I've done, in terms of work. So by putting, my heart and soul into each collection and show, and then even if I'm excited and happy with it, at a certain point, that sort of confidence and that sort of pride really rapidly switches to what did you think in order for me to believe I did a good job and to feel good about myself. So again, I want to avoid all the group therapy and like 45 years of psychotherapy, but I feel like as a person I need the validation and the sort of approval of others, and so what I fear is that I won't have that, and I fear that I won't be good enough, or what I put out there won't be good enough, or you won't like it, and if you don't like what I do, you won't like me, and all that kind of stuff. So I don't want to end this on a bad note or anything, but that's what my fears are. They're self-centered fears, you know.
We all have it.
Yeah.
No?
Fantastic. That is actually all we have time for.